So I've started the broadcast. I need to go and refresh. Okay, great. So what you're gonna do is delete. Yeah. Are there any other posts? Yeah.
This is 2013.
Oh, okay, that's fine then. And just keep refreshing it, and then okay, so you're gonna want to unpublish this. Yeah, and just keep an eye out for it, and then so now when you go into the actual, do you see the chat? Maybe I haven't enabled it. Let me just exit out of it and see if I have. Okay, I'm gonna enable chat.
All right.
Does it show up now that I've enabled chat?
Yes, you're not able to chat.
Okay. Can you hear me? Oh, you're gonna I guess you're gonna need the sound on
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay. There's a delay.
Now it says, does it show up as a number chat?
There's a delay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a bit of a delay. How does it show with the chat? Okay, so you wanna have that open,
Yeah.
and okay, so it should show up gradually as people log in. Some people have already told me they're not going to be able to attend.
Okay.
Yeah. So can you see the chat?
Yeah.
Okay. Shreya, I'm going to need you to sit next to me so you can see the chat. Here.
on the right.
Left here.
That's the icon is on the
Yeah.
left and the chat box is on the right.
Okay. So hello everyone. We're just testing here that everything is working with the webinar, and Shreya is with me. She's my lovely intern who joined from London College of Fashion last week, and so you'll see Shreya, who is also attending the webinar, and I'll be posting in questions through her profile or answers throughout the webinar. So I'm going to collapse out of the full screen right now and just check that everything is working. So if you just want to type in and see the, let me know that you're logged in and everything's working for you. I'm really excited to start. We're going to start in 5 minutes. And I know there's a few people who just emailed saying that they've had last-minute meetings, so I will be basically emailing you the recording of the session for those who can't attend, and obviously for those who can. So it's quite a long session. It's about 2 hours if you include also the Q&A. And so it's quite a large file that I'll be emailing you, and it takes a little bit to upload into the system and everything. So you should be receiving the recording though within the next 24 to 48 hours. So that's about that. I'm trying to think of anything else that we need to cover today before we get started. Any questions, anyone? It looks like we're going to be ready to start in 5 minutes. Okay, great, Melissa. Hi. You've joined. I see that you're chatting. So a little bit about the chatting. There's a lot of content that I'm going to be talking you through. And so what I've deliberately done is just direct the attendees to let them know that we'll open the chat room for questions halfway through the presentation, right after I finished presenting Subverted Classics, which is the second trend. And then we'll open the chat room again for questions at the end of the presentation. And then obviously I'm available for questions by email if there's anything that comes up after the presentation that you have questions about. I gave my previous 2 webinars in December, and even just yesterday I had one of the attendees ask me for some of the credits and references on a slide that they really loved. So I'm happy to answer questions even after the webinar is over. So, okay, I see Annette, no questions, but excited, all right. I'm just gonna wait a couple more minutes because it's not quite yet 12, and I did tell everyone we were joining in at 12, but I always like to kind of get started early and get people kind of excited and on board. So let me just now put the presentation full screen for you. So let me just, I guess for those who've already joined, I'll tell you a little bit about Trend Atelier. We are a trend forecasting consultancy. I founded Trend Atelier in 2011, but at the time I was a senior trend forecaster at WGSN in women's wear, and so I was extremely busy with that. And so Trend Atelier was at the time still kind of a concept and an idea, and something I really wanted to do down the line. And so in April 2013, I took a big leap of faith and started Trend Atelier full time, because I just it was time, and it's been amazing. I've been consulting with large trend forecasting companies such as WGSN and stylists, but I've also been writing trend articles. I've been doing public speaking, and I also consult with companies such as Bath and Body Works in the States, Nivea. Trying to think, I don't want to like sound like I'm name dropping, but it's been a busy year, and an opportunity that sort of came to me, and not necessarily exactly looking at it, but it's been amazing, was the opportunity to transform my trend research into trend seminars when the British Library approached me to present the trends as seminars. And it's been really successful. We've been doing it since the fall of 2013. And people started asking for webinars. And so we started doing that. And I realized that it was just a great opportunity to reach a wider audience. And so we did a couple of webinars with the British Library, and now I've been hosting the webinars myself, and it's been really good. And I think we're ready to start. So Today, we are going to focus on Spring-Summer 16 and Autumn-Winter 16-17. And this webinar is really designed to familiarize people with trend forecasting and also make very in-depth, impactful trend forecasts available to small, medium-sized businesses, because as you know, these presentations usually have a really high premium, and like for example, a yearly subscription for WGSN costs about $16,000, so roughly a little over 10,000 pounds a year. So what I'm sharing with you is quite potent today, and this is usually information that has quite a high premium, but I really want to get people familiar with Trend Atelier, and I really want to share the knowledge. This is one of the key platforms of Trend Atelier, is teaching, seminars, courses, sharing knowledge, and really inspiring you and informing you for your design choices, whether you're not quite sure what design direction you should take, whether you already know and you kind of just need confirmation. This is what the forecast is here for. So I've put our little Twitter hashtag at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Feel free to share the love throughout the presentation and let other people know about what you're discovering throughout this presentation. And also, obviously, it would be amazing if you follow us on Twitter at Trend Atelier to find out when we have our next webinars, our next events. And obviously, now that I have your information, I hope that's okay with you, I'm going to add you to my newsletter. I do a monthly newsletter where I talk about the events, but I also share like the blog of the month or what's inspiring me, latest trend reports, etc. So it's quite a good thing to have. So Spring-Summer 16. It's been a really great season to research, and today I'm going to take you through the macro trends, which take inspiration from art, design, technology, science, pop culture, craft, and artisanship, as well as interiors. And I've also included print and pattern inspiration in the color slides. But as you know, for those of you who are joining us today, we are giving you a little extra bonus with some additional complimentary spring print and pattern inspiration. We're creating an additional forecast only for print and pattern and graphic inspiration. And because we wanted to kind of launch this, we're offering you guys today this complimentary forecast for free. And so with the spring summer forecast today, and in addition to the print and pattern forecast that we'll be sending you, you're going to really get the big picture for the concepts set to inspire spring summer 16. And so the 4 trends that I'm going to walk you through today are modern fables, subverted classics, and warped nature. And there's one last concept at the end of the presentation, which will be called modesty solutions. And this is an early presentation for autumn-winter 16-17. And I will be doing the full autumn-winter 16-17 trend presentation in the spring of 2015. So what's interesting about spring-summer 16 is that my last forecast for autumn-winter 15-16 revolved around concerns for the environment, the economy, and the future of our species, and how we may adapt to survive, and to seek refuge. So there's kind of a dystopian element to what was inspiring autumn-winter. But for this season, it's a lot more positive, a lot more around storytelling and escapism. So our first trend, modern fables. This is a great trend, especially to start your spring summer 16 with, because it's a trend that's going to transition very well from winter into spring. So modern fables is about how designers examine clothing's capabilities to tell stories. And it's quite a big trend. It's the biggest one I'm presenting you today with warped nature. Modern fables alone has about 20 slides, to give you an idea. So it's about animist traditions, folk stories, and exploring ancient symbols from local cultures. And so here we look at British folk as well as influences from the Southern Hemisphere. And this takes us through a journey with makers using visual references known to all of us since childhood, ranging from our favorite characters to monsters. We also examine here the pull between good and evil, death and rebirth, lightness and darkness, investigating the macabre and stories around the undead. So the trend evolution, and this is something I've started doing to kind of explain how the trend is evolving, because trends don't just completely disappear. They usually just kind of evolve from season to season. And so for autumn-winter 15-16, we had voodoo, and it was very much around ritualistic traditions as well, but looking at it from a point of view of multicultural tribal aesthetics, which were projected into the future. And here we looked at influences from Africa and tied them in with contemporary art such as Basquiat. And it was an extremely handcrafted and kind of raw direction. Whereas modern fables is looking at folk stories, especially from British and Celtic traditions. So folk stories, this is the first aspect of modern fables. And I'm going to start this with playing for you Gareth Pugg's video showcasing his Spring Summer 15 collection. And it's part of a trio of films, and this one is called Megaliths, and it presents characters traditionally found in British folklore. And here the collection is really informed by an obsession with rites and rituals from British traditions. And Gareth Pugh, in his own words, says, the handwork, the ceremony aspects, the playful and sometimes outlandish practices, and the unnerving notion of an outsider society all deeply resonate with me. So here is the video. So this kind of gives you an idea. I'm going to stop the video now, but this kind of gives you a great idea of the concept. And, oh, I've just been told that there was no sound for the video. That's odd. Did everyone hear the video? I'm going to play it again. So the Gareth Pug video really gives you a great idea of this trend. So I am going to move on to the next slide, which is about animism. And animism in Latin is the worldview that non-human entities, animals, plants, and inanimate objects or phenomena possess a spiritual essence. And it's used in the anthropology of religion as a term for the belief system of some indigenous tribal peoples, especially prior to the development of organized religion. So although each culture has its own different mythologies and rituals, animism is said to describe the most common foundational thread of indigenous peoples' spiritual or supernatural perspective. So here we examine the mystery and the majesty of classical folk and its visual codes from Europe, as well as a few influences from Africa. There's a very totemic feel, either in clothing and furniture design, and on a decorative level, we're also seeing the introduction of subtle tribal geos. But what is really important here is the simplified, almost naive representations of animals and powerful wildlife creatures. So and the reason why these kind of naive representations exist is that, in contrast to fine art, folk art is characterized by exactly that kind of simple, naive style, often executed by farmers and laborers, in which traditional rules of proportions and perspectives are not employed. And so this could really be a key aspect to take into consideration when designing your Spring/Summer 16. Visually, designers really tap into that, and they tap into outsider art, which is a branch of folk art, and it represents the art of people who are, for example, also in prison or suffer from mental disabilities. So there's an obsessional and slightly compulsive quality to this type of print and pattern direction. And here you're looking at overlayering of pattern and imaginary shapes that seem almost obsessional, and the use of patchwork is key, as well as references to primitive ideas of worship. So on the left-hand side of your screen, I'm referencing Antwerp's Royal Academy graduate Hien Seo, and you can see this type of overlayering of patches. And to the right-hand side of your screen, Alex Mullins, this is his collection from Spring/Summer 15. We're looking again at that kind of brushwork and artful quality that is a great update to what we saw happening for Autumn/Winter 15-16. In addition to the totemic aspect I was talking about, we're really exploring the influence of masks. And a mask is an object normally worn for disguise, for protection, for performance, and they've been used since antiquity for both ceremonial and practical purposes. They really have a totemic and storytelling quality, and we're really seeing how this is influencing construction in garments as well as headwear. And this particular direction is really strong for headwear or even possibly beauty concepts. To the left-hand side of your screen, this is a picture I took from the Jean-Paul Gaultier exhibit at the Barbican this year. And to the right-hand side of your screen, we've got Henrik Vipskop's menswear collection, where he adapted that sculptural quality to the masks into the construction of menswear casual sweatshirts. So you could really take this dimensional quality to masks even into concepts for clothing construction. So I've shown you a few kind of tribal, slightly African influences, but generally this trend is really not so much looking at African tribal tradition. It's really looking at Anglo-Saxon myths. And you know, here I was finding a lot of the inspiration tapping into concepts of the Grim Reaper or the Scarecrow. And how this is coming through in terms of fashion is through long cloak shapes and ragged aspects. And I will actually walk you through this type of trend into cloak shapes and ragged aspects in the next couple of slides. So but here what's important to understand conceptually is we're examining the disguise death wears in ancient tales. And often that happened in black with haggard elements of ragged fabrics or dead tree branches. And in Celtic tradition and Breton folklore, it's represented as a spectral figure pretending death. It's usually represented as a tall, haggard figure with a long hat, probably long white hair, and has kind of this skeletal appeal. So there's quite a morbid quality to this trend, and we're looking at the scarecrow or the hangman as inspiration. And here you can really see this cloak shape that I was talking about. Comme des Garçons really explored this in their collections. I was also looking at Harry Cook's photo series called Idolatrous at the center top side of the screen. This photo shoot was centered around the theme of pagan rituals and festivals. We saw brick and bone here evoke the ideas and principles of the past, while also looking at how modern culture appropriates these themes into a new concept. And to the right-hand side of their screen, we're looking at Craig Green's collection, and he's actually just received the British Fashion Awards Emerging Talent Award in menswear. And he said he was looking a lot at the movie The Village of the Damned from the 1960s, and said his collection was inspired by a lot of imagery from religion and cults, as well as looking at workwear and uniform. So for summer, I really encourage you, as well as spring, to explore these longer silhouettes, even in lighter weight fabrications, and play around with knotting, tying, patching, layering, frayed edges as well, these kind of raw, unkept qualities that you could really explore for this. And we see this coming through as well, this kind of raw, tied, knotting aspect in the inspiration tying into dead tree branches and stick sculptures. And this is here really inspiring print and pattern, and it's even inspiring hairstyling with the knotting you see at the left-hand side of your screen, and again, headwear at the right-hand side of your screen. And what's interesting here is that it can really be applied to streetwear and youth markets, and it's about really mixing these kind of abstract patterns into a more street youthful quality. And that's why I showed this slide of this this cloak here at the bottom center side of the screen. It's called Native Nordic, and they combine this type of geometrical weaving with varsity t-shirt numbers, and you can see sort of the varsity teams layered into this type of travel pattern, which I think is a perfect example also of how to interpret this trend into something kind of edgy and young. In terms of this long cloak shape and the ragged qualities, we're exploring fringing. And fringing is something we've been seeing for several seasons now, and it doesn't seem to really be going away. But here we're looking at it in a less delicate quality that we saw in previous season. It's more raw and unkempt. And it's interesting to see it come through also in footwear through stiffer and more sculptural shapes. So designers are using fringing with dramatic effects that provoke theatrical movement and depth to clothing. And we can also see this as a dynamic expression of stalks and hay. And we look here at London-based designer Eleanor Amoroso in the center of this slide, and she encompasses modern elegance with a tough, darker side, with perhaps the most intriguing thing being the fact that each piece is made entirely by hand and not machine. So her work has previously been described as a commemoration of the forgotten art of craftsmanship. So definitely there's definitely a crafted and handmade quality to this trend. The second aspect that is quite important here, and like I was saying, where this trend explores concepts of the fight between good and evil. So here we're exploring terror and wonder. And so we're digging into some of our traditional horror stories or traditional characters that we've known for many long times from Gothic novels. So here I thought it was interesting to see Frankenstein inspiring designers. And this is, as you know, from English author Mary Shelley, and it's about eccentric scientist Victor Frankenstein, who creates a grotesque creature in an unorthodox scientific experiment. And Frankenstein is one of the key novels of Gothic literature, and it's also considered one of the earliest examples of science fiction, and it has a considerable influence across literature and popular culture. And it's interesting to see the links between Frankenstein's bride, the cloak she wears, the white hair, and some of the styling we've been seeing on the catwalks. So in terms of beauty, we're also exploring white hair and pale makeup. And this is really coming through quite strongly. So what's interesting is to also look at the concept of shadows or finishes that are chalky and matte. And designers are definitely exploring the concept of shadows. We're looking at Japanese designer Aurelage from Tokyo. This is to the bottom center side of your screen, this sort of pleated skirt and blazer that you're looking at that is giving the impression of shadows. And obviously one of the key designers to look at for this trend is also Rick Owens. In terms of detailing and trims, we're looking at wireframing and strapping, bolting. There's definitely a gladiator quality here, and it's also influencing very dramatic jewelry, very dramatic ornamentation and makeup. It's very theatrical here. And what's interesting is to explore also structural components and structural aspects around the human body. This is especially well shown here with Chromat to the bottom left-hand side of your screen, where they've done these type of grid structures around the models, and they're using that grid structure as well in the footwear. So within this is key to think about rebirth and growth and this concept of the undead coming back into this life. And so in terms of technology, it's interesting to see how this is being explored. There's, as you know, there's always a link between technology and fashion. And what's interesting is the concept of rebirth and something in flux or evolving, again, that is being brought back. So Shai Langen, these are the hands that you see on the screen, experiments and plays with latex and emulsions, creating cell-like droplets on the skin. And there's a lot of movement and a slightly disturbing quality to the way he shoots and photographs the materials he creates. And you can see these hands look like they're emerging out of the earth. And I want to call your attention especially to the ferrofluid dress created by Iris von Herpen in partnership with Nicola Casas. This is the dress that you're seeing lay down in a bed of fluid. And it's currently being exhibited in Rotterdam for the exhibit, The Future of Fashion is Now. And what's amazing about this dress is that it uses magnetic motion. It's a black 3D printed dress that is slowly growing and changing in shape with the help of the magnetic field in the water. And the work here aims to highlight the convergence of architecture, technology, and fashion design. So it's amazing to see right now the interest in this type of horror imagery, including vampire imagery. And here we're looking at vampire pulp coming through. So the classic vampire inspires this trend in shape, in color, in concept, and obviously it's been very popular with movies recently and a lot of TV series. But it's also, here we're also digging into classic folk take, the classic folk take of a mythical being who subsists by feeding on the life essence, generally blood. So vampires commonly wore shrouds and were bloated, which is a far cry from the sophisticated and charismatic sensual image we have today. And so here on this slide, I want to call your attention again to the cloak shapes and how interesting it is to see some of the designers explore these cloak shapes in very contrasted and pattern blocked and color blocked shapes. And also to look at blood red, which is something I will go back to in the color direction for this trend. It's key here, paired with black and white. And finally, I want to show you an excerpt from Vampire Pulp movie, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. This is the trailer for the movie, and it's the first Iranian vampire Western movie ever made. And it's quite a sheer pleasure, so I'm going to play for you the trailer. This is a really good example of how this trend can be interpreted.
منو نمیدونی چیزی که میگی چی هست؟ اگر الان یه دونه طوفان میاد، یه دونه طوفان خیلی شدید از پشت اون کوه چیزی عوض میشه.
So I wanted to show you this video because it's also a great sort of pop culture interpretation of the vampire theme. And it shows you how really in the concept of vampires sucking from the lifeblood essence is the idea of the loss of innocence, which is the next thing I'm going to be walking you through. So, loss of innocence, it's an important concept to explore in modern fables. There's this idea of no future, which is also an interesting concept influencing the youth market. And here we look at the digital aspect of this trend. And it's particularly well exemplified in the short animation, sorry, losing my spelling, the animation by Pluribel, Our Fires. It's really gives you the idea of the digital aesthetics that can be tied into the horror and erotica that are inspirations for Spring Summer 16. And so the video uses only monochrome pixels to create this creepy suburban world of shadowy clapboard houses, seances, hooded figures, and licked lips. And you can see these angelic teen faces turn demonic. So it's a really good way to show how graphic this trend can be in terms of black, bold and white, geometric. Could be a really great direction for knitwear, for also for t-shirts. So I'm going to play for you the music video now. So I'm going to stop the video now, but you can see that digital quality, and also towards the end of the clip when I was showing you, you can see these long cloak shapes again, which seem so representative to this trend. So in terms of pattern as well as materials, we're looking at new ways to use mesh, which has been a key fabric for many seasons now. And we're seeing it evolve now into more of a netting and sort of biomorphic quality that is very much inspired by 3D mapping, graphics, grid patterns, and mesh, and very much a 3D quality to the mesh here. And I want to point your attention to the top left-hand side of your screen, the sculpture with this kind of fleshy color. It's by Jason Hopkins, and it's called Biomimetic Lattice. And his work ties around death, and each lattice is rendered as though it was made from flesh. It's actually very macabre and slightly disturbing. And to the right-hand side of that, you've got work by artists Alora and Calzadilla that identify and express the stress and their hairline fractures in societal systems. So there's kind of a malaise here in this particular slide, and a sort of a sense of tension and entrapment and resistance. And this is something probably that is an update to what we were seeing in autumn-winter 15-16. And you'll see that the next trends are much more sort of positive and bright and fun as they often are for spring, summer. But in this case, we are indeed exploring concepts slightly around civil protest. And this is probably a direct link also to street goth and that whole influence on streetwear and athletic wear. So here we see the totemic aspect I was talking about coming through, especially in the representation of these urban street warriors. And we see classic elements taken from athletic and performance wear reinterpreted into patchworked clothes shapes, totemic masks. We see padding and overlayering. And in terms of graphics, we're looking at this secret coded languages with Kumjun Park's posters at the left-hand side of the screen. And I think in terms of designers, it's interesting to look at Hood by Year, their Spring-Summer 15 collection. It was very directional. That's why I still talk about it for Spring-Summer 16. And I think this exemplified the trend quite well. So in terms of loss of innocence, we also look at the age-old tales like the Little Red Riding Hood and again, the contrast between good and evil. And what's interesting here is that folklorists and cultural anthropologists saw Little Red Riding Hood in terms of solar myths and other naturally occurring cycles. So her red hood represents the bright sun, which is ultimately swallowed by the terrible night, the wolf. And the variations in which she is cut out of the wolf's belly represent the dawn. So in this interpretation, this tale could be about the season of spring, the month of May, and escaping the winter. So again, here we're looking at the fight between good and evil. And these are concepts that we also are tapping into in terms of dark fantasy and the idea of that evil queen and the symbolic imagery around the occult and witchcraft and dark spirits. So I want to also gear your attention towards Dan Hillier. These are his altered engravings that you see at the bottom center side of the screen. And these shapes that I show on this slide could really also inspire intricate lace and intricate lace constructions. I highly encourage the lace of geometric inspired lace in this direction for women's wear. And it could be introduced as something used in casual wear. For example, the cloak that you see on the catwalk at the top hand side of the screen, but it could also be used for occasion. And obviously we had Maleficent, the movie that came out with Angelina Jolie in 2014. And what's interesting here is that it portrays the story from the perspective of the antagonist. So we're looking at the sublime. And again, here are examples of how to introduce this geometric lace I'm talking about. Even in menswear, we're seeing lace come through for menswear as menswear becomes more and more indigenous and inspired by women's wear. So lace is a very good fabrication or pattern concept for this trend because of its majestic qualities. And I was also interested in how that was being interpreted in terms of art. So in the art installation at the bottom center side of the screen, we see a large-scale pattern wood project that looks at the intersections of culture and religion and the passage of time. And in this case, the geometrical patterning in Islamic sacred spaces. So I also want to point out the lizard creature adorned with lace, which is a good symbol of some of the hybrid and imaginary animals informing modern fables. So in terms of these imaginary animals that we think of magical forests and hybrid creatures seen in fairy tales. And these are very romantic visions that incorporate the macabre as well as sort of childhood fairy tales. And so here we're looking under the flesh of things with an anatomic and surgical theme coming through in illustration in terms of hybrid creatures being kind of brought back together, or these illustrations of these fawns with their flesh and trees emerging out of the flesh. So there's something quite dark and sublime and charismatic and almost really enthralling about this trend. It's very theatrical and really tapping into storytelling. So this will be almost the final slide for Modern Fables. Right after this, I'll be giving you a bit of color inspiration. But in terms of embellishment ideas that convey beauty with underlying darker narratives, we look at concepts, especially memento mori, which is the medieval Latin theory and practice of reflection on mortality, especially as a means of considering the vanity of earthly life and the transient nature of all earthly goods and pursuits. So I want to put your attention towards Valentin Leonida. This is the illustration at the top right-hand side of your screen in his series Heads. It's called Heads, and it's an attempt to turn our inside world out with titles such as Melancholia, Concentration, or Serpent Mind. He expresses different emotions in sharp and significant drawings. And interestingly, we also have Design Academy Eindhoven project. It's actually a prison project. This is this floral embroidery pattern at the right-hand side of the screen. And what's interesting here is that it was a project done with the prison, Van Heusen prison, and it represents different stitching techniques for different categories of prisoners. And again, it kind of ties back to that outsider art I was mentioning earlier. And so here it's really about creating beauty and seeing beauty emerge from darker elements or darker stories. So in terms of color, the key colors for this trend are fiery and bright red. Again, I was mentioning this color before, and it's carrying over from fall winter and being updated into spring summer 16 with very fiery tones. And then we've got black and white, which has been key. And the move on here is to move away from optic white and start using clay white with black. So you see that kind of off-white quality. In terms of the beauty of this trend and the luxurious quality that you could bring to this trend, we've seen metallics being very key for the last couple of seasons. And how they're evolving here is through touches and accents of gold. Here we're celebrating or hidden beauty, or accents of gold just emerging out of your accessories or your garments or even your makeup. And then finally, the last color that you could explore for this trend, and that taps into that fairy tale aspect, is flesh pink, which is a more muted version of bubble gum pink. So this concludes Modern Fables, and we're now going to move into Subverted Classics. Just to kind of switch things over, anyone have any questions about Modern Fables? And we could take a little break, because I know this was a lot of information to take in for Modern Fables. I'm just shooting you over a little question about Modern Fables, and see what most inspired you out of this trend. I'd be great to know. And again, if you want any specific references of some of these slides, I can send them over to you. Just shoot me an email. So I'm just there's a little bit of a delay. That's why you see this little silence in between. That's because I'm seeing that there's a bit of a delay. I'm a little bit ahead of you guys, and so I'm just waiting to see if some questions are coming through. Okay, it looks like no questions here. It looks like I can just continue with Subverted Classics, and then we'll just take a little question break again after Subverted Classics. All right. So Subverted Classics. This is a very different trend, which is what makes trend forecasting so interesting. And here we look at history becoming non-linear as the old and the new, the digital and the crafted come together for fresh expressions of beauty. So designers and artists contemporize past ideas into the present and consider historical references in art and subvert them through interference. So the result is both humorous, rebellious, and dynamic. And it's about traveling in time, and it's also about surrealism and illusions and subverting everyday familiar objects, iconic figurative works, and symbols of consumption. So in terms of how the trend evolved from autumn-winter 15-16, we were looking at digital RGB aesthetics and how they were being combined with the cinematic 50s and early 60s, which influenced bold color statements and offbeat color juxtapositions. This trend was very much about postmodernism and the 50s, as well as injections of the 80s, whereas Subverted Classics really looks into completely different historical references, much more ancient, and it's much more philosophical. So here we're looking at functionality, the yin and the yang, deconstruction, fullness and emptiness, and how that affects proportions. By taking away and deconstructing, we bring new value. And this direction also has a truly playful quality and sense of humor, but it also aims to disturb the viewer, to shift the focus and unsettle the viewer, forcing him or her to look twice at something. So we look at classical forms of decoration such as florals and filigree ornamentation, carving, woodwork, Baroque influences and classic era influences, and update them through material and placement or color. And here we also look at florals and how they're injected with something completely different or cut and spliced. There's quite a minimal side to this direction, but it's still just as playful and really playing on juxtaposition. So here we're questioning the way objects are constructed and banking on one aspect which is modified and taken out of its normal realm. And in the Celine Spring Summer 15 jacket to the left-hand side of the screen, you see the yellow panel is an add-on, and it actually makes the jacket non-functional, disturbing the garment and preventing it from having a center front opening. And I also like the invasion of the foot carrier on the right-hand side of your screen, which is inspired by dated visions of technology. And I was looking at also this archway in blue stone that is completely disturbed with what appears to be a kind of ruin of a classical column. So it's really the juxtaposition of the modern and the past. In terms of playful minimalism, we look at an additive and self-generating process made of cutting and collaging. So Artists and designers question these values, and they create mutable functions to objects, and they create unexpected functions and elements to garments. So they connect with the idea also of hacking, such as internet hacking, and it's interesting to see the geometric and minimalist quality that some makers are using to rework classics, such as sneakers, backpacks, and hats. So in terms of deconstruction, and playfulness, we're also exploring coincidence and the concept of spontaneity. And we explore here the relationship between hand and digital tools, investigating experimental manufacturing, technology, and materials. And we're really turning upside down notions of what's digitally enhanced. And this is really now about the post-digital era, where designers combine low-tech, high-tech, and craftsmanship in an extraordinary and playful way. So they use coincidence, imperfection, spontaneity, and play above all with distortion. So Stone and Foam, which is a design studio at the top left-hand side of your screen, they created a series of side tables. They have soft characteristics with which are combined with heavy, burdensome tabletops. So they're combining foam that is being distorted by the weight of wooden and marble tabletops. And it really creates a playful quality to these tables, a very expressive quality, and an almost cartoon-like quality. And my personal favorite of the trend is this trend mood board is the Stumble Upon Sofa by Alessandro Isola. This is at the center of your screen. He turns what looks like a Persian rug into a sofa, hiding in plain sight. And he's really here playing with what ordinarily is seen as a ridge in a carpet, which we would immediately pull straight and stand upon it so that it is completely flattened. But here he's playing with the imperfection and magnifying the deformation and actually turning it into a couch. And you can see even inside of the couch he's inserted some shelves for books. So this is a perfect example of distortion and playing with materials that you can distort in accessories, in art, and in interiors. This is a really interesting concept. In terms of graphics and prints, we've been exploring the idea of melting and distortion. There's definitely a big trend for melted and blurred artworks. And here, there's a blurring line between love and discard and damage. So the work moves between abstraction and looks almost like snapshots extracted from dreams. And distortion here is key, with melted florals as a key direction for prints. We're also looking at melted classic furniture and melted Grecian busts, which I will show in a later slide. And this melted trend translates really well into fashion and interiors. It turns really well into digital imagery. So this is something to really explore and play with. And in terms of distorting, we're looking at faux real and the surrealist aspect of this trend that is distorting and disturbing our perceptions of space and perspectives. So this could actually be a great direction for merchandising, like in-store merchandising or photo shoot concepts. And here we're looking at the physical form of architecture and the human body, creating extensions and parallel realities and translating this into print. So I thought it was the perfect example of this. I have several examples in this slide, including Sensing Spaces, which was the exhibit at the Royal College at the right-hand side of your screen. But to the bottom left-hand side of your screen, Alex Chinnick created a levitation vision of Covent Garden's market. And so commuters and visitors experienced a sudden suspension from reality as a section of Covent Garden's 184-year-old market building had seemingly broken free from its foundations and remained hovering in midair. Obviously, this was a faux real painting, but this was a project that exemplifies very well this trend. And in terms of what I was talking about, post-digital era, let me just drink some water here. Sorry. The post-digital era is a very important concept here because it's no longer about banking on what's digitally created or what's handmade. That's not necessarily what's important. What's important is the philosophy behind the object and the maker's intention. So in this particular board, we're really looking at a return to ornamentation and an uplifting mix of periods and cultures and materials. And again, exploring the relationship between hand and digital tools. So we're turning upside down notions of digitally enhanced design. And yes, technologies have opened completely new fields in the way we design, but now designers are really combining low-tech, high-tech, and craftsmanship in an extraordinary and playful way. So really explore new ways of creating ornamentation through 3D printing, as well as ceramics, as well as hand carving. But you can give it that incredibly precise and modern quality, no matter what technique you use. So it's really about putting history in a new context. And I was talking about blurred Grecian busts, and this slide, you can see the collection here by Jan Sutton. It's really inspired by Grecian history. So we're looking at classical Greek art and architecture, such as Parthenons and historical artifacts that are reinterpreted in innovative mediums. So I think what's interesting also is to look at Catherine Gross's design project. It's the center top slide. She created designs from wax, and her project is called Waxploration, and it thoughtfully reinterprets the meaning of home and the relationships between furniture and emotional spaces. And what I want to point out to here is that she's exploring the way people connect to cherished memories and the special atmosphere and tradition with their feeling of belonging. So she uses wax because it's all about the changing from solid to liquid and back. And the wax captures and freezes movements in time and obviously with them memory. And what's interesting about her sculptures and objects is that they look like classical columns that you could see in architecture, in Roman architecture and classic Greek architecture. So finally, we've got the This Is Not Clothing collection to the bottom right-hand side of your screen, where Jan Sutton was inspired by sculptures in the Greek Parthenon, and those depict the ferocious mythological battle. So there is that slightly gladiator mythological quality also to some of the objects and decorative references here that are explored. And I'm going to show you the video called Elements of Time by Ninki Coasters. She exhibited during Milan Design Week, and what she does is she casts decorative architectural carvings and historical patterns from large classic doors, and she does this through foam, where she creates these impressions when she applies the foam on top of these doors. I'm trying to explain her process, but you'll see through the video. And then she pulls away the foam once it's solidified and creates stools from it. And it's quite a poetic and process, and the result is quite impactful. Close the video now, but you can see this beautiful casting process that she's used with latex foam, which creates an amazing contrast between the modern material and synthetic material, which is foam, with the classical surfaces that she's working with. So there is really an idea of celebrating history as well as subverting a certain sense of humor in it. And we're seeing subverting Flemish art as a key trend as well. Here we have Super Flemish by Sasha Golderberg, who sees how modern heroes and villains are placed in 17th century